No.
Wait, are we starting right now?
Yeah, go ahead and hit scene.
We're on set.
Or go to live feed, I guess.
Like, are we smoke this?
Is that what you want?
Are we gonna put that song on?
The mic is hot. Hello. Hello, dear viewers.
Alright, welcome to Hidden Knowledge of the Modern Times with your hosts, Samael and Amman.
Hello.
What's a date?
Hello, YouTube. It's the 20th. Now it's the 20th.
Oh,
It is now the 20th.
So this is the October 19th show.
Yeah. Last week, though, we called it by the time we recorded it.
I don't know. But according to YouTube, it's going to be October 19th. And this is our episode on the apocalypse. So we're happy to bring that to you. We're here with our live studio audience. We have a couple of people here today.
Well, we have... Who do we have here? We have...
Dickhead.
Why don't we start from left to right? Rim is still working the cameras.
Studio audience we have here.
I'm still banned from working the cameras.
Yeah.
So
Banned?
Rim is taking over. Yeah, I was banned.
Yeah.
What'd you do wrong?
Everything.
Alright.
We're a little
He
intoxicated.
was usurping the will of the collective. I'm Dagon. I get to say that shit.
So we have
Let's pull back into the
your
environmental apocalypse that could happen right now.
Wait. Yeah.
Like the fucking planet
What was
floods,
that
everything
for?
gets really hot and humid and dense. And fucking.
I think
A
that's.
lot of things collapse because the planet's getting a little too hot.
I think that projection is. Yeah. I mean, what has the planet been doing for the last 3.5 billion years? But changing climate.
6,000 on its own.
It's been doing that,
On its own.
and we
Well,
have been a
it's such a fragile,
scratch.
tiny rock.
We've been a scratching it in the last 200 years.
Well, you have to realize though, just because it's been doing that for a long time doesn't mean that so far as our data has collected, as far as planets are concerned, is life a very fragile state.
No, I'm not saying that.
A very permanent and easy state. It's a hard state for a planet to balance all of the things it needs to balance to create life. It's not going to be a permanent state forever.
We're in the middle of the
Eventually the
Holocene.
world will end because if
We're in the middle of the Holocene.
We are getting closer to the sun, so eventually, regardless of how well we do to survive, our planet will overheat to the point that we cannot live on it. Not in our lifetime necessarily, definitely not because of that reason. A solar flare at any moment could overheat our planet.
Yeah.
That's the truth
So,
of it.
I think you have a very valid point with global warming here. Yes, the Earth has warmed slowly over time, and it goes through its jumps and it goes through its peaks and valleys, right? But can you breathe carbon? Because I can't. And if the atmosphere is totally polluted by carbon, then I'm going to die. So if we continue our carbon emission rate, I don't think our atmosphere is really going to be livable in that long.
Doesn't global warming eventually lead to another ice age?
We're still coming out of an ice age.
Isn't that what?
That's why the planet's heating up. It's because we're coming out of the last ice age.
We can't have 5 conversations at once.
Yeah.
There was an ice age like 10, 12,000 years ago. We're still coming out of it.
So
of course the planet's heating up. Of course.
Yeah, Joseph, what did you say?
It's been doing that for a long time.
Joseph.
That global warming could lead to another ice age?
Isn't that the process that it's not just global warming, it's actually increased extremes in temperature in both directions, and that it eventually leads to freezing over?
Well, that's actually why we don't call it global warming anymore, and why most people just refer
That's
to
why
it as
back in the
climate change.
70s, when the environmentalist movement first started, they were talking about in the 70s, talking about, the planet...
Dude, shut the fuck up.
Whoa.
Global extremes will cause a collapse.
I just want to get your attention. You're good.
That was a little much.
Yeah, we can only have one person talking at a time. The audio isn't going to capture 5 people talking.
Yeah, we've said it.
Yeah, we have a lot of people in the room right now.
People are interrupting too much, and it's really distracting from the audio.
Damn.
So yeah, I feel like enough heat in the atmosphere where everything. Of course, when you get the glaciers melting, then you're going to get a rapid influx of cold air, and that's been long foreseen, I think.
So, but humans predate the previous ice age.
Well, I don't know. I don't know.
Humans predate the previous ice age.
I don't know. 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 I don't know
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
There were two ice
we're gonna
ages
continue to
previous,
exist
and
after the
climates.
next ice age. So even if we do have a
Not
climate
every
collapse,
species
We had two ice
exists
ages.
throughout seasonal climate
Or
changes continues to do that forever.
Well, you know, we
There's
probably.
a lot of random extinctions that just happen.
I mean, we're kind of well adapted. I expect that if we already predate the previous ice age and now we're even more advanced than we were then, that we're probably going to be able to continue to exist even through the next climate crisis if it happens.
Oh yeah, us most definitely.
The Earth has like two known like recorded ice ages, right? It's two of them.
At least.
How
Yeah, I
long
think
of a
that-
period was in between the two ice ages?
The last one ended relatively shortly ago, so it was like 11 to 13,000 years ago, if I'm correct. But it was relatively early on in our human history, and it lasted for over 200,000 years. So I think that's pretty interesting, is that we really have adapted to an ice age, and then only recently has it dispersed. And most of our human history sort of sprung up after the ice age ended.
I wonder what human history was like before the last ice age.
That's a
Like
really
in between
good
the two of
question.
them, because like I don't really hear anything about like what happened in between like Ice Age 1 and Ice Age 2, you know?
No, this is entirely theoretical, but like,
Which movie
think
was
about
better?
like ice structures, like Eskimos build like ice huts,
Yeah.
ice houses. Like think about that. That kind of structure could have existed, and that history is long gone now.
Yeah, we had 200,000 years of relatively modern human history that we were existing in a totally frigid climate. The world was different than it was today. That's an interesting thing to think about, in my opinion.
Hey, there's ruins of a city 30,000 years ago.
Concrete melts in some
In
countries.
India, that was
I mean, that's a very valid point. What existed during the Ice Age that the Ice Age disrupted?
You really don't hear too much like human history about what happened during the Ice Age.
No, yeah.
Like you don't hear about
seemed-
wars or anything like that. Like we really don't know anything that happened during the Ice Age.
I wouldn't be surprised if there was a blank slate during the Ice Age end, that you had human history restart, and that everything that happened during the 200,000 years of Ice Age then restarted, and that's kind of the basis of our early human history. Because it does seem that way, right? Like even the creation myths are 6,000 years old.
Yeah.
And there's some stuff that kind of fringes at 8,000 and 10,000 years. But nothing seems to go beyond the end of the Ice Age.
Yeah.
Because the Ice Age's end seemed to be the start of what we recognize as modern civilization.
Yeah.
As far as I see, when I look at it and I look at the timeline,
Are you speculating that an advanced previous human civilization caused an ice age because of a climate collapse, and that we've lost all of our progress and we are starting over and heading towards another climate collapse?
I'm not saying it's impossible.
What about like
But-
the Neanderthal culture?
I'm not saying it's impossible, but the fact of the matter is that 1 of 6 mass extinctions on the planet Earth is caused by an intelligent species. We're going through the 6th mass extinction now, and it's caused by an intelligent species, no question about it. So how do we really know that the other 6 mass extinctions weren't caused by an intelligent species? It's a 1 in 6 chance. When there's only 6 on the planet Earth?
I mean,
Intelligent species.
Well, yeah, there
So
are only
that's like
6
there definitely could have been other like
factors.
collapses of civilization.
You know what's interesting?
that
Sure.
existed prior to the ones we know, like well beyond, and then we degenerated into tribalism again and got back up on our feet.
The climate
Or,
change
Yeah,
denial.
I'm not talking about that.
Civilization the rest of the world didn't know about.
I'm not talking about that. But a mass extinction is on the planet Earth when something rapid occurs which depopulates the entire Earth. So,
Yeah.
like the stereotype that we're used to is that an asteroid, hits the Yucatan Peninsula, and it's such a large asteroid that it eliminates most of the life on Earth, and only cockroaches or whatever survive, and you go into a new age of dinosaurs, and like Jurassic, Triassic, periods, Cretaceous periods, they're all separated by a mass extinction, to which life again arises, and takes unique shapes.
Dude,
But
that's why sea life is so interesting because it's existed for so fucking long.
yeah,
You
it
know,
has.
mushrooms are also 2 billion years old.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
one of the only
fungi.
land like series of evolution.
You know they say,
this
like-
chain of evolution that still exists like that old.
They say elephants are more intelligent than human beings. What's that say about like woolly mammoths when, they're extinct now, we don't have those around, we find them frozen, stuff like that. You were talking about like intelligent species, like there's like theories that elephants and just that genus of mammals were more intelligent than humans for even the longest time.
I don't think they're more intelligent, but I think they have their own unique intelligence, for sure.
Yeah.
Just like dolphins. I think
Elephants are
dolphins are
weird
really
animals.
intelligent, but they just can't do the same thing.
It's a different kind of intelligence.
Yeah, they don't have arms to write stuff with. They can't make fire. They're underwater.
Yeah, they're not mammals of tools like in symbolism like we are. They're different kind of intelligent.
Yeah,
Because they
I
can
mean,
still learn like tricks and stuff.
they could be smarter than us, but the tools
use
they
tools,
need to be able to produce the same society that we have, they don't
They
have.
do use tools though. Like there's evidence of pigs using tools and things like that.
There was a time in human history where people forgot like in some parts of the world what elephants and mammoths like actually look like. That they tried drawing them, and like if you Google like ancient art of elephants and stuff, it's just like bizarre, weird looking animals. Because like no human really knew what they looked like at some point.
That's like trying to ask people to draw a bike.
Before a bike was like even invented.
No, I mean, have you ever asked people to draw a bike? It's a great activity to do with a group of people.
Yeah.
Like, what is the frame? How do you draw the frame? I don't think we have it memorized. you know?
Exactly.
We know two wheels, but what the fuck is going in between?
If you ask people to draw a bike, you will get really
I couldn't do it
these
for you.
very
I'll
interesting,
be honest.
very
I probably would've done a
perceptions
big
of
wheel
how
one.
to draw a bike.
Speaking
Like,
of intelligent
fucking
mammals
1920s.
and the apocalypse and stuff like that, what if the dolphins are planning to kill us? Like, what if they're more intelligent than us and they're manipulating us?
I like
This
the
is
thought
like
of
a conspiracy version of Echo the Dolphin.
Sure, but like any given mammal that could be really more intelligent than humans without us knowing could easily throw us over just by fooling us with the perception that they're less intelligent than we are.
Have you ever looked at the plot of Echo the Dolphin?
The quantum echo of a dolphin?
The quantum.
is that a
no,
movie, or-
the plot of
It's a
Echo
Sega game.
the
What?
Dolphin.
No.
So Echo the Dolphin.
The quantum echo. Of the
Humans
dolphin.
and
I thought they
dolphins
had quasars.
go to Mars together because Earth is no longer habitable. And so you play Echo the Dolphin, who exists on Earth, and he beats the shit out of sharks and other like nefarious entities.
This
that
sounds
still
like some
exist on
really
Earth.
like bad like off series of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
You had to press X to flap your tail, and you would just basically ram everything
Oh,
to
so
death.
it's a game. Okay.
Oh, it's a
Yeah.
game. Yeah, it was on
Yeah.
PS1 or 2. One of them.
You make me think of Octodad a little
It
bit.
reminds me of Space
It's
Narwhals.
a little different, but it's a fun one. Anyway.
Space Narwhal.
It's a game. Like you
Is
fight
that
around
one
as
of
like
the, like,
space
official
narwhals. I don't know how to
games?
describe it.
No. It's
You know what I'm talking about?
Octopus one. A little different.
So, what's our next discussion topic?
Our next description topic would be
The
Book of
apocalypse.
Revelations.
Book of Revelations is a really good one.
Here for sure.
Getting into like a deeper hole of what the apocalypse means to us.
Yeah, I feel like Revelations is a go-to point about the apocalypse.
I mean, like the world's supposed to be on fire, right? It's supposed to be in
The question
on
is
fire.
the book
And
of
that's literally what we're doing, which is kind of funny.
Is the Book of Revelations like an entirely hypothetical situation that's explaining like the locusts coming down? Are they is it a metaphoric explanation to something that's happening around us?
That is an excellent question. Is it all metaphor or is it literal? Because
Exactly.
I personally don't believe anything in the Bible is literal.
Isn't there a whole thing?
It's very similar to
Some
the
things
Book of
have to
Genesis.
do literal, of course, I feel. But I mean,
What?
oh, fucking yes.
Well, isn't there a whole thing about Book of Revelations being written as like a letter to the Emperor of Rome? Yeah.
I don't think it's a letter to the Emperor of Rome. I think it was John
It was John. He was on an island.
hallucinating on an island because he had taken a couple too many herbs on that island, and they were all hallucinogenic. And he had a vision, and he wrote down that vision.
I could have been when induced it.
Yeah, but
that
no,
could've
I don't know.
been- that
a
could've
lot
been
of us have
catalyst
done
for
drugs
it.
and had visions, and we don't discount those things. We write them down like they're important also.
Absolutely.
They could have been important. It's
Yeah,
just they
I
could have. The catalyst for it could have been,
The book of
the herbs.
the book
Although
of
a lot of
Revelations
religious experiences
wouldn't
have been done through.
the book of Revelations wouldn't be
I
the
don't
only
believe it to be
metaphoric
bullshit.
book in the Bible. Like the book of Genesis was extremely metaphoric. Like the concept of like Eve being born from the rib of Adam is talking about like Adam is a logical mind of man. He's to represent the duality of the reality of things, and then Eve is supposed to represent the imagination. And to say like Eve is born from the rib of Adam is to say that imagination is created from the branch of reality. So it's like the Bible is extremely metaphoric, and I think it's especially true when it comes to the book of Genesis and the book of
Ooh,
Revelation.
is this what we're getting into?
I agree. The beginning and the end are extremely metaphoric.
Probably the most
Did you guys already
metaphoric parts of
discuss
the Bible.
whether or not he was tripping mushrooms while he was on that island, though?
Okay, where did the whole island
Probably
drug
was.
thing come from?
Well,
Like,
he was on an island. John was on an island, and that's how Revelation.
when the
was
book of
written.
Revelations was
He
written.
was writing it.
He was
I did not know that.
He was on an island.
I actually don't know too much. Like I've read a little bit of the book of Revelations, but I don't know like.
I've read it 8 times.
I actually need to give it a proper read.
It's crazy and very interesting.
We should be talking
I
about
believe
that.
the great city of Babylon.
And also
which is
very
there.
symbolic, and even in Christian traditions, like they don't really understand and have different interpretations as to what it means. For instance, the concept of the rapture. So some Christians believe that one day, before Jesus comes back, every single person who's a true follower of Jesus is just going to disappear wherever they're at. Planes are going to crash, cars are going to crash, Christians are just going to be gone, and we're just going to be stuck here in the remaining apocalypse and just be like in hell. And that hell will cause some people to convert to Christianity, and so those who are capable of being saved will be forced to be saved, basically, conceptually speaking, and then they'll be saved, and then that's like basically how the world's going to unfold. A lot of people think that's not how it's going to happen at all, and then when Jesus comes back, he's coming back like that, that's the end of the world. And up until that, Christians will still be here throughout all of the hard times. They don't believe that
Yes.
Christians are just going to disappear.
You said that there's an interpretation that the Christians are just going to vanish. Is that a textual reference, or
Yes.
is that an So there's
And
the
Jesus
word
will
vanish
come
and
back.
disappear.
And Jesus will come back, and all who follow him will be swept up into the air with him.
Yeah,
And
they
then
talk
after
about.
that, there's a couple of chapters involving the apocalypse. So from that interpretation, because of the way it's written in a format to say this happened, Christians disappeared, and then
Yeah, I
this
think
happened.
at the book of Revelations, before like the locusts come and the sea turns to blood and stuff like that, they're talking about how like the Christians are being saved and basically evacuated from the
So-
planet.
It's an easy term, guys. Rapture.
Yes, well,
It's
there is
the rapture.
there is a pre-tribulation rapture. What you're talking about, Bliss?
Yes.
Pre-tribulation or post-tribulation, I
Yes.
guess you call it.
that's
And
correct.
they also talk about the people that become converts during this tribulation. You know, people who were not raptured up. They
Yes.
talk about them basically becoming martyrs. And also, it will become much more difficult. I don't know in what way. I mean, that is one example of becoming a
Yeah.
martyr. But so it's going to be quite dystopian.
Well, and then that wraps into the concept of zombies, because the concept of zombies
Zombies, all right, here we
originally
go.
came, and so my parents do not believe in
Pre-tribulation?
no
Or they're post-tribulation?
no, they believe in vaccination. They don't believe in a cremation. Because if you cremate a body, when Jesus comes back and he raises all the Christians from the dead and takes them to heaven in their new bodies, he uses their old bodies as a format to heal them. And so in that mindset, that's where the zombies as a concept for us originally came from, was the concept of us being raised from the dead. And so Christians started burialism, and almost all patriarchal faiths practice burialism for this concept that one day God will bring them back, or that there's a sacredness to their physical form. And so, thus they bury their bodies because one day Jesus will bring them back. Zombies therefore came as like a fear or kind of an association psychologically with that.
I think you're
That's cool.
overlooking.
I will say though, should not. I doubt God would be limited by physical things.
Oh yeah, I agree.
So I think that's
Absolutely.
personally, I think that's bullshit.
Yeah, me too.
Like, fuck, he cremated him. I guess he has to go to hell.
I think
Like,
you're
no, I
overlooking
highly doubt that.
a very important
So-
conspiracy theory here, and that's that
This is
Jesus
stupid.
himself was a zombie. He raised himself 3 days after the dead. Jesus was a zombie.
Hearing it from the bowman himself.
Jesus was
Jesus was a zombie.
So why don't we talk about the idea of the Messiah? Because I think that's a very interesting idea to talk about.
Here we go.
Because if you get into Revelations, it clearly goes through the process of, there has to be world peace and the Antichrist has to declare himself. And I commonly find myself in Facebook debates about the Messiah is coming, and it's like, okay, well, where's all the other signs?
Right.
We have to. The sky is not blotted out. There is not world peace. So how can
They
you
talk
say
about
the
world
Messiah? Yeah, the Antichrist establishes world peace.
Is that good? But would that be pre-rapture
John Lennon.
or post-rapture?
It's
It
John Lennon.
says post-rapture,
Well,
I guess, according to.
I think that at the beginning of the conversation about the rapture, you stated that you think that that portion of the Bible is highly metaphorical, but now it sounds like you're forcing everyone to provide you literal evidence of the coming of the Messiah.
I don't think-
is the
he's
Messiah
necessarily saying
itself
I would still
also a
expect it.
metaphor?
I would still expect it to be metaphorical.
So does that mean that the Messiah can be any person?
I would say so.
So
I would
does that
agree.
mean that the Messiah can be every person?
Yeah, I would say
Exactly.
So
so.
then does that mean that these signs are subjective interpretations of signs?
Yeah. The whole thing is metaphorical.
Okay.
It's very confusing, I think, because if we were living in it, then it would be very hard to determine if we were actually in this phase or not, or whatever, of this prophecy of Revelation. And that's assuming that all of the prophecies of Revelation are true. But
Which is
So-
why you get like all the conspiracy theorists and stuff going around saying like, oh, the second coming is blah blah blah, is because it's so hard to identify with all these metaphoric interpretations what the second coming really is and what's really going on.
yeah, but I think if you're to take Revelations for what it is, there's a clear chronology in Revelation. So
For sure.
it goes into the same thing as like Ragnarok. It kind of has the same. It's an end times thing, and it's an end times prophecy, and it goes through the same motions that chronologically some events occur.
Right, like this bad thing will happen, and this bad thing will happen, and the 7 plagues.
Yeah, exactly. I think the most common thing for me is like Leviathan and Jormungand.
Are we talking about Leviathan by you can't write Leviathan?
I'm talking about like the biblical Leviathan
Oh, okay.
and the Nordic philosophy of Ragnarok and Jormungand.
Gotcha.
So Jormungand and Leviathan meet the same end. Basically that they are destroyed in the end times. They have similar stories within both the Bible and in Nordic mythology. Which is very strange.
About that?
There's something very
there's an old
strange
god.
about
There's
that.
actually an old god that is based on Marduk.
Yeah,
It's a 1,000-eyed man with like eyes all around his head.
Yeah.
And he holds 2 swords, and he kills I can't remember what the name of the fucking dragon is. There's a bunch of names for Marduk too. It's not just that.
there's it's the same thing with Nordic philosophy in the Bible. That Jormungand and the Leviathan have the same stories in the Bible as they do in Nordic mythology. And the fact that Ragnarok and Revelation both occur at the end of Jormungand and Leviathan are very odd.
That's actually the origin, in my opinion, because it's from a religion that existed at least like 6,000 to 10,000 years ago.
Yeah,
And
in
in the
separate parts of the
Mediterranean
world.
basin. So like right there near where Nordic culture and Christian culture both would have originated from,
So-
like at the roots, way back when. So 10,000
Well,
years prior, that influence
Nordic
still existed.
Nordic culture is completely separate
Of,
from
Samael and Dragon. It took it over from that.
the Christian origin of the Middle East. So that to me is very strange. That the world serpent, and it's almost symbolic in a way, the world serpent occurs in both of these cultures, despite their geographic differences at the time of their origin of the stories.
It speaks to something much larger than that.
Yeah, I think so. I think it does.
Well, we have more topics. than just Revelations and Ragnarok. I mean, there's all kinds of like end time prophecies out there, and they all kind of point in the same direction. Right?
I think so. I think most end times prophecies, if you really overlay them, they seem to have certain similarities to them.
Do you think it just stems from like a fear of death that we all have? Like, do you think it really comes from something so base, or do you think there's some actual feeling to it?
I think that there's a reasonable common sense prediction of the end of our society, and that most religions seem to end there.
What's the next topic?
A lot of
Can we-
people argue with a lot of
No,
arguments.
not because I want to jump to it, but because I want to know
Yeah.
whether or not to segue
I mean, we can talk about Cthulhu.
Segue into what?
what I requested the next topic point to be, but I don't know if it got written down.
Oh, just talking about the tech apocalypse?
No.
Or aliens?
No.
What was it
Well,
actually?
go ahead.
I'm
Go
curious.
ahead.
It was
Illustrate this for us.
the Judgment and the Akashic Records. So
What is that?
the Akashic Records, what they're usually described as is some kind of document that records all of the actions of your past and history upon which you'll be judged or which you may be able to access. But I don't think it's a book, and I have my own opinions about what it really is. But the Judgment, and we were just discussing the fact that all of these
Everything we've ever done.
groups simultaneously or from different geographic locations came to the same stories, I think is because it's really sort of an abstraction of our analysis of the way life is, and that judgment is not some period of time in the future. It's actually every single moment all the time, because this is judgment right now, and then right now is also judgment, and right now is
The idea that
also
we're currently
the death
basically like what
of
we
the
view
moment
currently as
previous.
purgatory, right?
And everything that you're choosing to do is being weighed in order to move you forward into the next thing.
So the apocalypse is a metaphor.
The apocalypse is a metaphor, and judgment happens in every moment in time. And you're judged against the Akashic Records, which is a record of all things that you've done in your past, which
So
means
if the apocalypse
Akashic
happened,
records are
like
reference-
if the actual like revelations were to happen, then there's that constant idea that you have to be moral, you have to follow the faith, otherwise if you didn't, then you would be fucked in this event.
Well, there's different fractalizations of it, but
That's
it's
like
still
the manipulation
out of
thing we
the
were talking
same.
about earlier
Well,
that happens.
back to that being a metaphor, there's a theory that the concept that all of Revelations was fulfilled when Jerusalem fell in 72 AD. So in 72 AD, Jerusalem's king, I think, if I remember the details correctly, got really stubborn, and Rome came in and just obliterated them and killed a lot of people. And a lot of people ran to the hills. A lot of Christians were killed. A lot of Christians ran. And it said that if this is a time that it would be hard to bear children. And they were saying all of these prophecies because if you're thinking about it rationally speaking, I think that if you're saying a prophecy as an individual, it's going to be harder to prophesy something that's very far in the future, which is very far from your psyche and your point in history, and it's more likely to prophesy something that is close to your history, is close to your life, is close to your experiences, if that thing, if prophecy was even possible to begin with. Going back to the story of the virgin birth, there's also a story that had to do with the king of Babylon, and that wasn't actually a reference to Jesus at all. That was more of a close reference to Babylon and Daniel's captivity and all of that, and didn't have to do, or Isaiah's captivity. I don't remember exactly where that verse came from, but when I was studying it in college, there was a theory that whole prophecy of Jesus being born by a virgin didn't have to do with Jesus, but was actually a misinterpretation of a verse that had to do with the king that was born at that time. But that's all. Again, is it a metaphor or is it an accurate prediction?
if it's a metaphor, then it makes sense that we will be able to apply it to any period in history if we take the time to analyze that period. Because if it's a metaphor, then we can metaphorically map it to any timeline or any situation, and it will make some sense, because the metaphor itself is a perfect archetypal abstraction of a moment in time that happens all the time. But we can expand it and contract it.
Like it's always something you can adapt to whatever state of mind or whatever point in time you're at, or whatever.
And it works in reverse, because if it's expandable and contractible and mappable against other things, it is therefore able to be abstracted from the observation of those events into a sort of universal truth that we carry around and know. So it's something that's been created out of observations and then can be reapplied back into the history.
So I actually want to elaborate on what you're saying right now. What you were talking about on judgment, and how like judgment was based on like this current moment, like every moment is judgment and so on, and how like all these different spiritualities and religions came to these same general ideas. I want to kind of like pitch out the idea that religion and spirituality are both concepts of art. The way that they're formulated is we look in and observe the world around us to create, to make observations and get real information, but we're lacking certain information in order to describe the world around us and what's going on. So we use our imagination to create systems like the chakra systems or the 7 levels of spirituality as reflected in Yogi philosophy, which is exactly the same as the chakra system, in order to create abstract models to explain stuff like human consciousness and psychology and stuff like that, which is, you know, where everything comes from. Like everything that we have about science and knowledge actually comes from and stems from its roots in magic and spirituality. Like even mathematics is based in magic and spirituality. And it's just like, we create these spiritualities, we create these religions and creative interpretations and metaphors to explain the world around us simply because we are incapable of doing so.
I completely agree, and after we create the abstraction, after we begin to use the abstraction, we then have better knowledge about the thing that's beyond that we didn't understand before. And only by applying the abstraction and actually looking into what the chakras are, trying to live by them, trying to follow this abstract information and embodying it in your life, will you then have the perspective necessary to take the step past that and actually apply scientific method to understand and codify what's beyond that.
When a metaphor is interpreted, it's interpreted in the mind of the individual within their own perception. So I can give a metaphor to one person, and one person can break down that metaphor, and it will mean something to them differently than it could mean to me, because their perception or past experiences has led them to interpret the metaphor in such a certain way. So this is also like really important about like just art and understanding spirituality in general, is how individuals like break down and understand like information regarding metaphors. Like you can just take a metaphor and just break it down in your own way, and it will make sense to a person specifically because they are breaking it down in a way that they already understand, that the interpretation is happening within their own perception.
But if we create metaphors in order to try and imagine upon a truth that we don't understand yet, then some are going to be more accurate and some interpretations are going to be less accurate, and over time the group that's less accurate is going to fall behind the progress of the group that is more accurate, that pushes this into scientific method.
Which confronts one of the most important questions that I personally see in the world is, does the world reflect art, or does art reflect the world? Our metaphors are simply a reflection of our reality before our very eyes.
I think that goes down to, I mean, you just knocked into the observer effect and the fact that we are consciously imagining the reality that we choose and then sharing it and persuading with other people to generate that reality into the future.
So to say the book of Revelations is a metaphor is to say that the end of the world could mean something different to each and every individual one of us, that our own apocalypse could be just our own experience in the world of what the end of the world really is to our own individual experience, which is kind of cool on the subject that he was talking about, on how like judgment is happening at every single moment, that our next steps in life are depending on where we're at currently.
Yeah, because you could be experiencing hell, and then somebody else could walk in and say, "This is great, it's not a problem."
But for you, that could be a problem.
Right.
On that same concept, how many things are self-fulfilling prophecies? Because if we're actively generating and creating our realities, which is a way that we think, and that we choose to look at the future, and we decide like, hey, you know, this this prophecy for the future is the way the future is going to act. For the example, global warming or climate change, you know. So you have a book that says this is how the future is going to end. And so God's never going to flood the world again. That's a prophecy. He's never going to do that. That's impossible. And this old book that has been passed on to us is a piece of art that is very valuable to our culture. It influences our psyche highly. You know, is going to overturn, you know, these random people that, like, you know, this scientific data that's relatively new. You know, that holds more.
What idea can you pull out of Noah's Ark though? Like, what moral do you actually draw from Noah's Ark?
Well, they God will never flood the earth again. My whole point of that being that
Core of the rainbow.
It's like
if you believe that, then is it a self-fulfilling prophecy? Some people think that if you think something, you are going to create that reality. If you think hard enough about it.
you worry the world is going to end, so you do something to save the world, and the world doesn't end, right? Is that what you're saying? Like, we fulfill our own prophecies by convincing ourselves.
You know how many times I've heard that the world is going to end, therefore there's no reason I should take any action on.
You're talking about like self-fulfilling prophecies, and it's like the only reason why the world hasn't ended is because we're consistently worrying about whether the world is going to end. Like, this little detail is going to end the world, so we focus our energy in solving that little detail so the world doesn't end, which is why the world doesn't end.
Right.
What if we simply just treat the earth with respect and not be assholes, and like, I guess recycling is probably the best thing we can do. Like, if we can remember at the moment, you know, trying to keep like a good habit, I guess. Just being careful.
The fear, the constant like acknowledgement that your actions can do something negative to the world is what's essentially keeping the world in place. But that being said, what about events that are outside of human control? What if the world could end by something that humans can't stop?
Well, then it was inevitable.
Like, exactly, like a meteor or something like that. Like, it's just something, like, maybe humans can stop a meteor, like maybe we can shoot a giant laser beam at it, like, who knows, but there are things that are outside of our control that we would just say, like, if the time has come for the world to end that is outside of human control, then it's just simply that it's just time to end.
Oh, wow.
It's accepted then, I guess, right?
I wanted to say something earlier that was kind of important to me.
Life goes on, man.
And I really wanted to say this, and like about like how a lot of the things that we question about, say, the Bible, right? We always say it's probably a metaphor for this. It's probably what this and that is. You know, I mean, what is logic with a God that can do anything the heck he wants? You know, what is, like, why say everything?
It's beyond everything that we have, man.
Exactly.
Everything we know, every way we think.
Just
our physical world, everywhere.
Sure, but then what's the point of dictating a prophecy?
I mean, there's no problem with questioning. I have nothing wrong with that. But
no, not questioning prophecy. Why dictate a prophecy if you're just gonna do whatever you want?
That's honestly, like, personally one of my hardest struggles.
That's not what I was going down.
Go ahead.
I was saying, like, not everything's a metaphor, though. Maybe some things.
There's literally gonna be a dragon that comes out of space and destroys the earth.
I mean, Revelation,
Probably be an alien.
it's probably full of metaphors and like things that are very similar to what's
What
going
if a
to
new
happen.
heaven and new earth that God's preparing for us is
getting this from a
Mars?
meta-modernist perspective. Like, meta-modernism is art. In art is like where I take modernism, which is like I always get the terms confused. Modernism is like, I think anyone, it's like basically like you can create an art piece without having like an exact meaning behind that art piece. And whatever came before it was like people tried to encapsulate meanings of like romance and stuff like that into their art. Well, metamodernism is like, let's mix the two. Let's take concepts of abstraction and metaphoric interpretation, but also have some structure behind it that we say, let's give it, like, we want you to focus on this, but we still want you to interpret this in your own way.
So here's, I recently popped it open and started reading. When you look at how Jesus behaved and what he did and what he said and how he interacted, it takes that whole metaphor thing and condenses it into actionable behaviors in a way that is really cool. So the story about the paralyzed guy who was like next to the well that would heal him, or the pool that would heal him, and he couldn't move or didn't get up, and like Jesus got him to move. If you read that line by line, this is what the interaction was. He was walking through the street, he saw this dude laying on the ground, and he goes, "Why are you laying on the ground?" And the guy says, "Well, I tried to get to the pool, but every time I try to go to the pool, somebody else gets in my way, and I don't know what to do." And Jesus says, "Get up!" And there's an exclamation point in the sentence. And he literally just says,
Oh, he could have
"Get
raised
the
his
fuck
voice.
up and go."
It's about perception.
And then the guy gets up and he goes. It's like Jesus was
Well,
just
that's actually like the biggest thing though.
this old dude. The only reason that he didn't get up and go to the pool is because everybody was letting him slide on not taking responsibility for taking care of himself, and Jesus was like, "Get the fuck up and move." And suddenly that becomes a miracle. But it's true, because
I like that.
people don't do that for each other. And Jesus knew that this is about taking personal responsibility and doing the thing not only for yourself but also for other people. So get up and go. And then the guy just got up.
This is actually one of the biggest arguments revolving magic is magic when you do something and you convince something that someone is magic, like say I were to do something to fool your perception into seeing that I moved this cup without touching it.
Yes.
It's like, did that magic really happen, or was it just your perception fooling you into believing that magic really happened? And that's kind of something that also focuses around miracles in the Bible is, were the miracles really something that were happening, or does it deal with something about the perception of the person that the miracles were happening on, or the people viewing the miracles?
So-
like when Jesus turned water into wine, was the water really turned into wine, or was it just fooling the perception of the people drinking the water into thinking that the water was really wine?
Yeah, I mean,
Kind of like the yeast and hook.
I have one.
it asks an interesting question, is that if I have committed a miracle in such a way where I perform magic, and I truly believe that me, myself, I have committed a miracle by committing this act of magic,
Yes.
and nobody knows otherwise,
Right.
is it a miracle?
Exactly.
I think what I
Because
heard.
nobody believes or knows otherwise. I have committed an act of magic. I
How
have
would you
produced-
define magic? Like, what would you define magic as?
Well,
I know the answer to
in
this
this
one.
in this sense, I am producing a miracle, right?
Mhm.
Just as a magician produces a miracle,
Mhm.
I am also producing a miracle. Like Miser's dream, right? I'm producing a bunch of coins out of my hand. Oh goodness, look at how many coins I have. So, yeah, Teller does a very good interpretation of Miser's dream.
Recall
but
it's one of the servants.
when I do that act, if I truly believe that through my mechanisms that I am producing coins, and the people believe that I am producing coins,
Are those coins
what,
real?
what is the difference between that and a
Okay.
miracle?
And-
because there's nobody to say otherwise.
Exactly, and like this kind of goes into like ideas
But
about
did you
like
really produce
what's
the coins?
real and like what
Like
really
the
isn't.
actual core of reality.
If
Every,
we all
no,
define a miracle.
because there's nobody to observe it and to say that this didn't
Yeah,
occur
can I
in
get
the
my
way of a
hand in
miracle.
here?
All of the books written about Jesus were written about 50 to 80 years after he passed
So-
away.
There was a father who brought his son to Jesus because the son was sick. The son had a fever. And the father said, "Please heal my son. He has a fever. I know that you can help him." And then Jesus, took the son and said, "Just go away. I'll take care of it." And the dad was really upset, and he left, and he closed the door. And then the next day, he brings the son back out and says, "Your son's fine." And the father said, when did the fever leave him? And then Jesus said, he left him on the 4th hour, and that was the exact moment that the dad left. When you stress somebody out, you can emotionally affect their health, or you can feed them the wrong things, or you can treat them the wrong way, and they can get sick. But if Jesus was aware of this, and he realized that all the kid needed was to be calmed down and to be given
to
some
adjust
water,
the perception.
then
His
he
dad
could
needed
heal.
to leave.
Yeah, the dad was the thing who was making the son sick, but the dad didn't know that he was either parenting incorrectly or managing incorrectly.
Which is
Stressing
where
his kid out.
people define like magicians from. Magicians are not necessarily people who do magic in a sense that you would think magic is, but people who work with the perception in order to help someone's perception.
But let's
in some way.
deal with perception. Jesus was performing a miracle because he was using knowledge and information that wasn't readily available to everybody, that he may not even know necessarily where the information was coming from, because he was intuitively receiving the information from this broader sphere. And he was perceiving that information as a voice from God, and he was in a dialogue with it, and it was telling him, give him the water, do this, which I've heard before. So I know that that kind of direct audio communication is possible, and I think there are others in this room who have experienced that and can agree. So he's a magician because he had the faith and the will to commit and to listen, and he was being given information which is practical, actionable, and eventually we can abstract, understand, and perform science on to understand why it works. But until such time, it's magic.
So this kind of goes into something like back in the age of ancient Egyptian civilizations, they used to essentially train pharaohs into believing that they would ascend into gods, and the reason is really when your royalty is being raised and stuff like that, to give someone the perception of God is to make someone act as if they are God, to give them the attributes of being God, the perception of God itself. Does the perception of being God itself make others view you as if you are a godlike entity to have godlike powers? How does that even affect the perception of people around you, or even your perception itself?
Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-il.
Can I add a whole tangent to this?
What's that?
The concept that we are made in the image of God. The concept.
Oh, I love that. That's like my favorite thing.
So, and this is a long tangent. I really want to get this whole thing out. So, the people who wrote the Bible, specifically the story of Jesus, wrote it a significant amount of time after he died. And Christians say, and a lot of people of different faiths say, for instance, Buddha and kings, as you said, many people that we have said are God. We decide what they say is law. We also say when someone writes a Bible or writes a holy book that they are inspired by God. They go up to a mountain and they have a God experience. They come down, they write a book. We say that they have, the inside of a God. I think that is a hubris or a logical fallacy that we fall into to an extent. In that, yes, it is valid, but to an extent, everything that we say is valid. We put certain things as law, and it narrows our perspective when we decide that what that individual experience is a limited experience, is absolute law, that we can't have that same sort of experience with that higher power.
Your beliefs in the world essentially change the way that you yourself see and live in the world. So it's like, when you believe something to be true, it might not be true to somebody else, but you're living a life as if that thing is true, right? So it's like perception, just the things that you believe, your opinions in the world ultimately just affect the way that you live, the things that you go by, and just your philosophies in life in general.
Let's tackle the definition of God in order to answer your question. God is an ideal. It's a perfect version. And if I have an ideal of myself, if I have an ideal version of myself, and I'm moving towards that, I'm actually listening to my intuition to tell me how to get there. It's telling me how to get closer to it. I have a relationship with it, and it's me.
God honestly is one thing I don't think people can...
Everyone has several personalities inside myself. The image of the ideal that I am trying to move towards.
But see,
there's our subconscious self, our id,
I believe
our ego, our talking self, the part of ourself that we translate the world through. And in that concept, there's also the super ego. If you've ever watched Avatar, you remember that he goes through the 7 chakra alignments, and he meets a giant version of himself, and that being his higher self, his ideal for himself. And I think that in that case, if you look at people's beliefs in gods, a lot of times their beliefs in gods reflect who God needs to be for them, if that makes any sense.
So are they created in the image of the thing that...
Or are they creating it in their image? A lot of times people do that.
So, you said man was made, you were talking about like man being made in the image of God, right?
Do we make God in the image of us sometimes?
Let me bring up the spiral, the golden spiral. The golden spiral is a spiral that will perfectly align with its inner layers because it is mathematically created perfectly. It is broken into perfect sizes and perfect squares in order for the next ratio of the golden spiral to be perfectly within the spiral. So everything that is in the universe is created from some sort of mathematical template. When you break down anything and everything that exists, you will get simple shapes like triangles, circles, stuff like that, which is essentially sacred geometry, and it's talking about how everything in the universe is created from repetition and patterns. And this goes everything, not just like physical like concepts, like constructs, like what we see before us, like books and stuff, but concepts into mentality and how like psychology works and just how natures work in general. Is everything is just based on these mathematical patterns. And the most important pattern is the golden spiral. And I bring it up because the relationship is like all things are based on mathematical templates and everything. So we ourselves, our consciousness, to say that man is made in the image of God is, I think, is a great misinterpretation of a very important metaphor. To say man is made in the image of God is often assumed as something that means that man is made to look like God, but what I really think it means is that man, the consciousness and the model and thinking patterns, the templates of thinking itself, is modeled after the collective consciousness that is God, which is all that is. We are just the reflections of everything that is composed together. So man is made in the image of God is a topic about consciousness and not what man actually is.
So you're saying that the individual consciousness is a fractal of the universe.
It is a reflection of the collective consciousness of everything.
Does
So
sound
like
quite
all of us are
fractal.
in this
Yeah,
room
I agree.
having conversations right now, being engaged in one physical entity as a group. Our group is our one physical entity that is having one conversation. All of our thoughts right now are in sync with each other as a one collective thought to create one collective conversation.
I'd also say this, so we are psyches and bodies, and we change and we develop over time. We agree on that. People develop, we learn, and we build and adapt, right? So we must be building and adapting towards something. We're trying to adapt positively, we're growing. So we must be growing towards something, and if there must be a standard that we're growing towards. So we're literally being made according to an image that we're trying to better represent.
The perfect mathematical template, which is why I was talking about like sacred geometry talks about how everything is based on these perfect templates. The perfect templates of the perfect template of consciousness, I guess, would be. Well, let's talk about perfection in general. Like, the perfect form of anything. Like, say I have, like, a bunch of different cups, they're all malformed. Well, the perfect cup is the perfect concept of everything that creates the attribute of what a cup is. So the perfect cup would be all the attributes of all my experiences with cups in general to create the perfect abstract concepts of a cup. So the perfect human, or what we're going to, would be the perfect abstract concept of consciousness itself.
But also we have infinite diversity, and we continue to experience increasing diversity.
Do we
so that
have
means
infinite diversity?
That means that the abstract continues to evolve. Because if we have this cup, well then we have this cup, and then somebody creates that cup, and we creatively divide things, and we have this entropic sort of random emergence of new characteristics, which means all the perfect model has to now adapt to the random evolution that was created.
So this is now dipping into the most important concept, I think, in the entire world, as above, so below. And it's that the idea that reality is a reflection of imagination, and imagination is a reflection of reality, or the divine is a reflection of reality, and reality is a reflection of divine. What that really means is, I'm sitting here explaining the perfect cup.
So without.
Exactly. I'm sitting here explaining the perfect cup to you, right? Well, these imperfect forms, the imperfect cups that we see here in reality, they're only reflections of the perfect abstract world where the perfect cup exists. We are the implementation of the abstract realm.
Yeah.
So,
Do you think each individual will have their own perfect cup?
I'm sorry?
Do you think each individual will have their own perfect cup?
That's a complicated question. That's like asking essentially like,
Or is there an ideal perfect?
This is
Like,
honestly
relating
a
it back to
concept
how,
of
like,
perception.
connecting the collective consciousness. Like, your ideal version of the perfect cup is going to be very much different from someone who prefers like drinking out of a straw as opposed to just.
I think
Well, I don't think that's necessarily true, because like
bent.
all
like,
of our
you're a
experience.
fragment of the collective consciousness, right? So you have your tiny personality that exists within the greater web, greater network of people and ideas and swirls and shit.
I think the abstract is perfect in a perfect state regardless of perception. I don't think necessarily like the abstract is at all perception based. It's completely based on just properties of just things. It's like a couple, right? A couple is two things, but is a couple a thing, or is it two separate things? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
is the couple a physical thing
You have a cup
itself?
of water, right?
Yeah.
Is the cup of water one object, or is the water an object?
A
or
bunch of different
individual
droplets of
particle?
water. Like, at what point
Or
does
like-
it stop becoming a drop, like a bunch of droplets of water, and it
Multiple
becomes a body of water?
units.
I
Sure.
think you can prove that perfect is not a subjective, independent choice because we have aesthetics that are involuntarily pleasing. So we have things that we look at, we look around, we're like, yeah, this is or this isn't really captivating. And the fact that that exists means that regardless of whether you decide you want to like something, when you notice something that is universally aesthetic, you're like, I didn't even know that existed, but damn, that's pretty.
So, as someone who kind of studies aesthetics and stuff like that,
Geometry patterns, so it's like,
half of our perception of aesthetics definitely come from our past experiences and our perceptions. Like, if I'm like I was looking at, like I was explaining earlier, like I was looking at an art piece, at two different art pieces at the Cummer, and they were both essentially the same art piece. One was composed of dead butterflies, and the other one was composed of dead flies. One of them gave me a positive emotion, but the other one gave me a negative. The reason one gave me a negative was because I have bad experiences with flies in general. Like, they're disgusting, I don't want them on my food, blah blah blah, but I only have good experiences with butterflies, positive experiences, because I see beauty in them. But they're usually beautiful because, like, beauty also this goes into like our human nature and our evolutional instinct is like, even stuff like brighter colors, like the reason, like just the sun being that which gives life is the reason why we see brighter colors as typically more positive and more beautiful, is because what we associate beauty and the concept of prettiness with, which is like just an abstract concept to describe the attributes of beauty, is like they're all coming from our past experiences, but there are some things that are different than those experiences. Like, straighter and cleaner lines are easier and less strain on the individual to interpret, and are therefore more beautiful because they cause less processing to go on. So there's like a lot of different attributes that go into like what we think perception really is. A lot of it does have to do with our past experiences, but there are mathematical attributes and just things about everything that we see beauty in that is just based on our nature and not just our experiences of
I
it.
think that flies are associated with filth, piss, shit, and other things that we don't want to interact with.
Exactly.
I think a lot of it has to do
Butterflies
with association.
aren't. Now, to the degree that mathematical geometric emergence mirrors the fact that, like, we have created a mathematical pattern for things that we don't like, and created a mathematical patterns for things we do want to associate with, and split that in two different directions. So that allows us to continue to have a mathematical model for things, and also have this historical emotional association with flies that means, well, I don't like them because I don't like flies, or, well, I don't like them because I like bright colors. They both can be true.
Something I'd like to add, I think it's kind of interesting because up close, butterflies and flies look more or less equally creepy. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at like facially, you know.
SpongeBob episode where SpongeBob's terrified by, or
Right.
was it Sandy? Who was terrified?
No,
by the
SpongeBob and
butterflies?
Patrick were freaked out
Yeah,
by
they were
that.
freaked out by the
So
butterflies.
this is
They thought it was a
extremely
monster.
to know as an artist that, like, beauty and what we see positivity and negativity in come from our past experiences, because when we go and we create art pieces and we want to embellish and influence certain emotions and certain ideas into people, we can use these concepts and understandings of where our emotions come from to better construct our pieces and better construct our works. Like, if I wanted to create a piece that influenced positivity, I'm not going to throw blood in there. Like, that just doesn't make sense. Like,
That's
people
because of our
are going to
associations
negatively
with it.
associate,
But
blood with
maybe in
death.
a different culture, blood is a sign of something completely different.
Yeah,
maybe
and the thing
it's
is,
more
like,
positive.
blood can also be seen as romance and intimacy, and not just rage and resentment. Like, there's
Or life,
different meanings behind
vibrance,
different
maybe
things.
even, who knows?
And different people will see different meanings behind different symbolisms. Like, kind of a radical example, like, I could look at a sunflower and see intelligence, and someone else can look at a sunflower and for some reason see horror. Like, you can, like...
I don't think that's in our culture, but yeah, for sure.
That goes a lot into, like,
Maybe
styles.
Scary story about a sunflower too.
That goes a lot into, like, styles and stuff like that, and understanding, like, why people appeal to certain
You have one
tastes.
person who
Yeah,
was
for sure.
beaten half to death by a sunflower doesn't mean that the general population as a whole isn't perceiving the same general
Yeah.
direction towards
Yeah.
perfection, because that perfect could still be perfect even if people deviate to their adherence to the correct perception of perfect. Like, I could have an incredibly repressed sexuality, and therefore I can't associate with things that are supposed to be sexually healthy because I'm fucked up. But that doesn't mean that that's not healthy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Shoot, I had something to elaborate on that.
I like that.
I lost my train of thought.
So when it comes to the concept of like a higher concept and a lower concept, how do you think, and how that applies to art, and back to what you were saying that religion is a concept of art, then how does that concept play into our concept of God and Satan,
Back
our concept
to
of
the
right
Messiah.
and wrong? Yes.
The Messiah is the person who can perceive the hell and the heaven at the same time and make decisions and follow their intuition to move forward and demonstrate and be an example and be a guide, because they're seeing the rapture all the time. They have full view. This is not 1% spectrum vision. This is like full fucking vision. And they live in a way that's guiding.
So, this is like, I was telling someone the other day when I was, what's up?
Oh, no, I was going to say, we are running short on time.
Okay.
We should
Yeah,
try
we're
and
gonna
wrap
wrap it up soon.
Okay, we should wrap it
Oh
up.
my goodness,
Collect your
yeah.
thoughts now, I suppose.
Okay, so I was telling
we could
someone,
talk about it forever.
okay, I was telling
Closing
someone,
statements here.
Yes.
I was telling someone the other day about how, like, when you get into philosophy and stuff like that, like, the hardest thing is, like, you'll start to realize what the world really is, and I'll tell people, like, ignorance is bliss, because, like, when you don't know things and you just kind of follow the way of the world, like, you don't get a certain perception of the world and what the real world really is. But the people who do have the knowledge of how the world operates and how it works essentially lead the flow of the world in such a way, which is going into the topics of the messiahs and stuff like that. And it's like, there are people who know and people who don't know. The ignorant are being led, but they're being led through their ignorance, if that makes sense. I don't really know how to, like, put it exactly into words, but the messiahs are like the people who understand the knowledge behind the world and understand that what you put out into the world has a reaction, and that those reactions, like everything that you do, has a reaction, and like you can lead the world with that. And that's essentially what a messiah is. It's just someone who understands the nature of the world and uses it to drive the world.
Do you think that that's what the Messiah is?
I don't think there's a single the Messiah. I think there has been a lot of messiahs, like Socrates, Jesus, Plato. Like, I think a lot of people have, just anyone who is essentially like invested in driving the direction that the world just essentially moves in. And that's what I view as a
I
messiah.
think that when you get to the Socrates would be trying to explain things to people to try and get them to know, but a more elevated messiah doesn't require sharing knowledge. They can just sort of make things work and make things happen without trying to influence the thoughts of people.
No, because like most of Jesus's midlife is missing. What happened to Jesus during his midlife? Where did he go, and what did he learn, and what did he come back with? I think he came back with knowledge, and had he not
Man,
had
you
that
guys are worse
knowledge,
than the presidential
couldn't drive the
candidates
world.
when it comes to final statements.
You would equate Socrates with Jesus?
No, not necessarily. I'm saying, like, essentially anyone who has knowledge of the world and drives history in some way, I would associate with the term Messiah.
Enlightened. Yeah.
The enlightened.
Alright, closing statements.
That was supposed to be a closing statement.
The end of the world is all in your head.
All right.
That's a
I like
brilliant
it.
one. I love
Joseph,
it.
closing statements.
Joseph, yeah.
Pass.
All right. Mushroom King, yes.
Mushroom King.
I mean, I have an argument that I want to throw around this whole time, but I didn't even get to say
can
a
you-
word. And like,
Are you
the
able
concept
to
of
turn
the
it into-
argument was that it seems that pretty much everything is metaphorical, but if a God really existed and the God wanted people to understand it, he would not make it a riddle.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, he would make it
So,
hard,
like,
right?
Yeah, so it's obvious.
maybe a lot of this stuff that he says is true. I mean, it's really cool to have theories about it, but like just always question even your own theories sometimes, because
Yeah. Well, I was actually talking about that with a Christian friend
You never know,
recently.
you could be
It's
deceiving
like,
yourself.
yeah.
I was talking about that with a Christian friend recently.
Statement's
It's like
closed already.
if God wanted you to know, he would tell you, right?
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Bliss,
But-
you have anything?
To me, I think it can't be literal, but
Some of it, like the whole Leviathan and
It's
actual
not all
dragon.
metaphorical.
But what do we really know as being reality? Couldn't that be broken from something that can do anything at any time? he
I
wants?
guess look, we know a fair bit according to the way that it appears to be.
I mean, what are we all under the age of 30? We haven't been on this earth really
Sure,
long.
yeah, but there's considerable constants. Like you have to eat food every day, don't you?
Yes.
And
But-
you would establish that as being fact.
I mean, it's
Would
pretty
you
much
say
my
that-
reality.
Would
I
you
live
say
in,
that that's
so-
variable? You know, tomorrow you can start where 2 months you don't have to eat food.
Can't
I
do
mean,
that.
reality is the same way. It has the same constants that go with it.
Oh, absolutely.
That's
think it
part
can
of
be
the
broken
miracle,
anytime.
though. Well, that's part of the miracle, though. Is that reality? That's a pretty crazy thing that we revolve our life around each other. You have to consume another life to live.
Yeah.
You have to live within this community. You cannot live by yourself unless you're a plant.
If
Permits?
it's 80,
Huh?
Permits?
Alright, you still have to eat food, you still have to eat animals, you still have to live
But you
within
need-
a society. Within an environment. Anyways,
You're
my
saying
final
environment,
statements,
okay.
because
Yes,
we're doing it now, no more
to
debates.
your final statements, Bliss.
So my final statements on that would be to say, as the common phrase of living in the moment, that the concept that the world will end is always a future reality that we have predicted and worried about and considered for a very long time. What is important is to not live too much dwelling on the future or the past, but to do as much in the current moment to take care of the current moment, and the future will get better naturally because of it.
That's
I like
the goal.
that one.
That's the goal.
Totally agree.
He had to like pause it.
Like,
Oh, I'm so
Yeah,
sorry,
you
bro. I
did.
didn't. I'm sorry.
Brandon, do you have something to say?
Final statements. That went on a really long time. I can't wait to see what the timestamp for this was or whatever.
Oh yeah, it's the longest episode yet for sure.
For
Yeah,
sure.
We went over the hour.
For sure. But I have nothing to say. So, you guys, at all?
Right.
It's coming. Probably. Something's gonna end at some point. It may not be now, may not be for 5,000 years, but I'd rather it was later than sooner.
Of course. Me too.
There is the perfect ideal
I'm not
of
ready to die.
humanity existing as an entity that is prolonged well into like the time as we know it, like well beyond our current state. We could preserve ourselves in bits of technology, and we could also preserve ourselves biologically if we really fucking try. So let's do it.
Justin?
Yes, I have something to say. Don't get too comfortable because you're in the middle of the apocalypse, and the rest of it is coming soon. So
Coming
Yes,
soon
it's
to a
not.
theater near you.
Big words.
Coming soon to DVD
Next
Blu-ray.
time,
Yes.
we'll invite Cthulhu as our guest.
Shit, we still gotta get
Yeah.
this.
yeah,
This is,
I emailed
yeah,
him,
that's
but
something.
he never responds very quickly.
I don't
so
think
we'll see
that
if he shows
computers
up.
work
Well,
very
my
well under
goodness.
the ocean.
Well, I don't
feel
know
like
what he does.
telepathic
Haircut
signals.
would be
I feel like incantations would
Maybe he
work
doesn't
better.
receive it.
Well, you know,
We should be able to get something out there.
Bliss, he has an email, and I email him to see if he's gonna respond, but He doesn't always respond most of the time.
He's a busy
So,
guy.
yeah, I mean,
Well, he
he's busy.
sleeps. He's
You know,
sleeping, I think.
I would say he's busy.
He does
I'd say
sleep
he's lazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, he sleeps around all the time, and you know, he
He's a
just
bit of a
does his
lazy
thing.
bastard.
And he goes
Yeah,
to
I'd
rest, and he gets up, he answers his emails. I don't give a shit, whatever. But the apocalypse.
When he comes, he comes.
The apocalypse is happening now. We're gonna have a good time. Things are gonna end soon, and you make of it what you will. So I think this has been the hidden knowledge of the modern times, and don't forget to
Like, share, and subscribe.
Smash that like button.
subscribe.
Smash that motherfucking like button, y'all!
Which side is it?
Good morning, good morning,
It's-
guys. 100 years, 100
Is
seasons.
subscribe over here or over here? I think it's over here. Go ahead and
Somewhere.
click down here at some on either
it's the
side.
Wiggins with
The
these.
subscribe button.
Line
So
around.
Do some editing.
Go ahead and click subscribe. You're gonna edit my hand to the other direction.
No, yeah, we'll actually like cut your hand out. We'll like push it, like move it, like disembody it from yeah. We'll
I
figure
feel like we
something.
covered-
Somewhere at the bottom of the screen is the subscribe button, so go ahead and click that. And we'll see you next time on Hidden Knowledge of the Modern Times.
You guys have some long hair, man, and it's the end times. So I'm gonna open up the apocalypse.
In the